I moved into a cheap apartment with strange rules. I thought the rules were a joke until Nightfall. I signed the lease because it was cheap, close to my new job, and available right away. I moved my boxes in on a Sunday afternoon, trying to convince myself the peeling paint was a style choice. The apartment didn't care about my optimism. It had its own voice waiting for me. The laminated sheet was taped inside the front door at eye level. Thick plastic, sharp corners, and a clean list typed in a sturdy font. 12 rules. A second copy hung inside the bathroom, another above the kitchen sink. One on the hall closet, one on the bedroom door. Every room had its copy like a warning that traveled with me. At first I thought it was a landlord's joke, or some exhausted attempt to set boundaries for sloppy tenants. No shoes on the windowsill, who even does that? No whistling indoors. No mirrors uncovered after sunset. It went on. It sounded like superstition and passive aggression married and had a child. I touched the laminate. It was warm, like it had been held. Someone had made this important. Someone had taped it everywhere so no one could say they didn't see. I stood there with my keys still in my hand and read the list twice. The master rule came at the end like a punchline without a joke. Never rearrange the furniture. Not do not remove furniture or do not damage property. Just never rearrange it. I laughed. Then I stopped because I realized I was alone and my laugh sounded out of place. The place had a couch against the far wall, a small dining table, 2 chairs, a bed with a wooden headboard, a dresser, a short bookshelf by the door, and a metal coat rack in the hall. A rug with a faded pattern sat under the coffee table. Everything looked staged by someone who didn't want to live here, but wanted it to look like it was meant to be lived in. I told myself I wouldn't touch anything that first night. I would sleep, go to work, and deal with the weird list later. I didn't even unpack my mugs. I left the boxes stacked like walls around me. The sun went down while I was scrolling on my phone, and I didn't notice until the window turned from gray to black. The apartment dimmed in a quiet way. I got up to turn on the lamp by the couch. The mirror above the dresser in the bedroom caught my eye in the hallway. It was bare. No cloth, no curtain, no tape in sight. Rule 3, no mirrors uncovered after sunset. I walked to the bedroom and stood in the doorway, trying to decide if I cared. It was a rule posted on a laminated sheet, not a law of nature. I could cover it in the morning. I could ignore a piece of paper, even if there were 5 copies. I went back to the living room and turned on the lamp. It flicked on with a mild buzz. I sat down again and tried to re-enter my phone, but I glanced toward the hall in spite of myself. The uncovered mirror sat there like a dare. 10 minutes later, I went to the kitchen to get water. The tap squeaked when I turned it. The water ran clear. The second laminated sheet watched me from above the sink. No whistling indoors, no dripping tap. Dante leaves still water sitting overnight. The rules were practical if you squinted. Mold, noise, neighbor complaints. I finished my glass and set it by the sink. I started to leave, then I turned back because I felt like I should prove something to a piece of plastic. I left the tap barely open so that a thin thread of water slipped down the steel. It wasn't even a drip. Technically, a rule broken. I was tired and I wanted to go to bed and not think about it. 2 steps into the hall, I heard the knock. It wasn't on the door. It wasn't on the wall. It came from the pipes. 3 gentle taps from inside the plumbing, like someone asking to come up from a well. I went back to the sink and shut off the tap. The knock stopped. I waited. The apartment waited. I told myself it was old pipes and old pipes are dramatic. I went to the bedroom because I was now annoyed at myself for feeling watched. I pulled the blanket over the mirror without looking at my face. I told myself I was doing it to help me sleep, not because I was obeying a list of nonsense. I lay down. The bed frame groaned for the first time since I arrived. The sound didn't stop right away. It traveled a little, as if something had stepped onto the frame and then decided against it. I held my breath and listened. The silence after a strange sound is never quiet. It presses in. I closed my eyes and made a small promise to myself. I wouldn't test the rules again. The next morning, I woke early and felt decent. The daylight made the place look almost normal. I made coffee at a corner of counter I had cleared. I scanned the rules again to laugh them off in daylight, and they didn't look as funny as they had the night before. I went to work. The walk was short, and I told no one about the laminated sheets because it sounded like I had rented a place from a conspiracy forum. I came home at 6, set my keys on the bookshelf, and went to the bathroom. There was a second mirror rule there, handwritten in marker on a small square of masking tape stuck to the edge of the frame. Keep it covered if the light outside is gone. I touched the tape and found it fresh. It peeled up a little like it had been placed yesterday. I hadn't seen it before. I couldn't prove it wasn't there, but I had the feeling of a new scab on a bruise. I covered every mirror before dinner. I didn't want to hear the pipes knock again. I didn't want to notice anything that noticed me noticing it. It took 1 week to realize the rules weren't about a landlord's mood. They were about thresholds and who gets to cross them. I didn't have that language yet, but I felt it press against the doorways. On Wednesday, I vacuumed. The rug bunched a little and I nudged the coffee table to flatten it. I didn't move the table much. Inches. I put it back roughly where it had been. That night, the rule sheet inside the living room had a crease I didn't recall. The corner near never rearranged the furniture had curled as if someone had breathed on it. I slept with my back to the door and the blanket over my head like a child. On Friday, my neighbor knocked on my door at 9. I had not met anyone on my floor yet. She was older than me by 2 decades maybe. She held a bag of oranges and asked if I wanted some. I invited her in because I was raised to be polite. She stepped just inside and her eyes went to the laminated sheet without any surprise. "You renew," she said. "Yes, first week. They left the furniture for you." "That's good," she said. She set the oranges on the table like she knew where everything belonged. "You covered the mirrors?" "Yes," I said. I felt childish, like I was reporting to an aunt. "Good," she said. "The last one left one uncovered by mistake. It was a short mistake." I waited for her to explain, and she didn't. She asked if my smoke alarm worked. She opened my hall closet without asking and looked at the ceiling. "Good," she said again. "We've had trouble with alarms." I said. "The building," she said. "Read the list every day for a while, not just your copy. They change." She stepped back into the hall and kept her foot in the door like people do when they intend to leave but want to say one more thing. "If a rule updates in fresh ink, it's for you." "How do you know?" "Because it will match your mistakes," she said in a plain way I felt in my stomach. "I am across the hall if you hear knocking after midnight. Do not open the door unless you understand which side you ray on." She left before I thought of a thing to ask that didn't make me sound afraid. I told myself she was lonely and had invented rituals to occupy the quiet hours. Then I closed my door and my eyes went to the laminate near the knob. I stepped closer. Beneath Rule 6, no whistling indoors, a new line had been added, thinner than the typed font. It wasn't quite handwriting. It was a kind of print that pretended to be a standard. It said, "Especially after washing your hands." That was me. I washed my hands after work every day. I whistled out of habit. I had done both without thought. I had heard the pipes knock like knuckles wrapped in ice. I pressed my thumb to the plastic and felt a slight give I had not noticed. The list wasn't frozen. It could accept weight. The next update appeared on Saturday night while I was brushing my teeth. I had left a glass of water on the sink when I went to shower. When I came back, there were 3 small wet marks on the floor by the drain. They were not footprints. They were the suggestion of toes. I wiped them up with a towel that I threw outside the bathroom door without looking. I lifted the laminate page and found the edge of the tape was new. A line had been added under no dripping tap. No standing water, bowls, cups, basins, empty all vessels. I slept on the couch that night because the mirror in the bedroom felt too heavy even covered. I dreamed without images, only the knowledge that someone was checking boxes on a list and I hadn't finished one of them. I woke at 4 and listened to the building. When a building is sleeping, you can tell which sounds belong to it and which ones are smuggled in. On Sunday, I knocked on my neighbor's door with one of the oranges, a peace offering, and a silent admission. She opened as if she had been waiting near the handle. "Do you want to sit?" she asked. I said yes. "I am Myra," she said. "Tea?" "I am fine," I said. "It's about the rules." "Always about the rules," she said. She waved me to a chair. Her place was the mirror of mine with different colors, no laminated sheets in sight. I looked without meaning to, and she saw. I keep mine in a drawer. "You can get rid of them, but you can choose where to read." "What are they?" I asked. "They raise seals," she said. If you follow them, you live with neighbors you can tea meet. If you break one, you meet them. She stirred nothing in a cup she wasn't tea drinking. Neighbors, I said. I meant something else, but I was polite with my fear. Every room is a threshold. The rules are mapped to those thresholds. Some protect the door, some the mirrors, some the plumbing. The house wants order. The other side likes disorder that looks like little things. Other side of what? I asked. Of living, she said. They don't want you, they want to be you. But they can step across unless they understand how you step. That's why they like patterns. Whistling in the bathroom after washing your hands, that's a pattern. Drips at night, pattern. Mirrors at sunset, pattern of light. She looked as if she were repeating something told to her a long time ago. The last tenant broke a rule because it changed while he slept. It added a word to I never rearrange the furniture. That kind of change means the house is aligning. It was asking him to fail. He lasted 3 days. What happened? I said. My voice forgot to be calm. He went missing like a sock goes missing. No mess, just a change in how the drawers closed. A draft where there wasn't one. The super told the police he broke his lease. The house told the rest of us we could hear a second breath under our own for a while. I wanted to ask if she believed herself. I wanted to ask if this was grief. The oranges on her counter looked too bright in all this talk. Why not move? I asked. Because you don't get to leave just because you say so, she said. You've already noticed the list, haven't you? Yes, I said. I tried to ignore it. It didn't ignore me back. Follow them until you understand them, she said. Then you might survive long enough to change what could be changed. It's not about making it happy. It's about keeping it balanced, seal to seal. She stared past me to a corner of her living room where a plant should have been. If the list starts writing in fresh ink, you ray on its mind. That's never a good thing. I left her place with my orange and a new way to look at my apartment. Every piece of furniture felt nailed down by invisible screws. Each threshold felt like a line I could smudge if I wasn't careful. The laminate sheets weren't advice. They were a map with a hazard key I didn't yet understand. For 2 weeks I obeyed. I covered the mirrors before sunset. I dried the sink. I didn't whistle, not even when a song stuck in my head. I didn't block vents. I didn't prop doors with shoes. I didn't hang anything from the doorknobs, even though I wanted to hang my keys. I slept with the bed where it had always been, the headboard flush against the wall that faced the hallway. The list behaved. It didn't update. It didn't curl its corner like a tongue. It just sat and watched me work to please it like a strict teacher who wait to nod. On a Wednesday, I came home to find a new copy of the rules inside the fridge. The door opened, and there it was, laminated and beaded with cold. It had the same 12 rules, the same master command. And a new footnote in that thin printed hand, no lights after 1 unless you're already in bed. I didn't work nights. I didn't need to be told when to sleep. But the fresh ink felt like a nudge I didn't like. At 12:58 on Friday night, I stood in the kitchen in the dark and tried to see if the apartment minded my drinking water. The digital clock on the stove glowed. The laminate page in the fridge shone with condensation. I heard one soft tap somewhere under my feet, like something testing the floor plan from below. I went to bed at 12:59. That weekend, I took a pencil and a notebook and I drew my apartment. Not to scale, just lines and boxes, doorways marked, furniture placed. I drew the couch as a rectangle, the coffee table as a small square over the rug, the dining table near the kitchen, the bookshelf by the door, the bed, the dresser, the mirror locations with excess and a small note, covered. I sat with the drawing until I felt silly. Then I drew a second plan. I marked the rules to the areas. No mirrors in the bedroom after sunset, a star. No whistling in the bathroom, a different star. No dripping tap in the kitchen, a star. No blocking vents, small circles where the vents lived. No open closets after midnight, another I hadn't noticed until I looked. The list had it there, keep closets closed after midnight. I had ignored it because it sounded like something a parent says. It became a map of crossings. The door was a crossing. The windows, the floor drain in the bathroom, the sink, the mirror surfaces. I drew arrows where the air traveled, where light bounced off glass and turned into a kind of pond for faces to step across. I filled a trash bag with things I suddenly felt I shouldn't own. A metal wind chime I had never hung, a small hand mirror in a drawer, a pair of shoes with bells on the laces that a friend had thought was funny once. I didn't throw them away. I put them in the hall closet. Then I read the rule again: keep closets closed after midnight. It didn't say what to keep in them. Late one night, the list decided to speak in my voice. I got up to use the bathroom in the dark because I had memorized the path. The laminated sheet on the bathroom wall had a new line in the thin print. Don't look at your reflection when you're tired. You know what you look like. It felt like a parent again. It felt like a trick. I reached up and slid the cover off the mirror an inch without thinking, because that is what happens when something tells you not to do the thing you were already doing. I saw darkness and the suggestion of movement behind my shoulder. Not a figure, not a face. A shift in the way space looked, as if my own bathroom had another door just beyond the frame of the mirror, and something was deciding whether to open it. I covered the mirror quickly. The cover caught the edge, and for a second I saw my eyes move independently from my head. I shut the cover and stood without moving until my legs remembered the rest of me and I could sit back on the closed toilet lid. I sat there and waited for the mirror to decide it was a wall again. The next morning, the rule sheet had a smudge near that new line, like a hand had been there. Like mine, the updates came in little bites after that. One under the kitchen copy: if you drop a utensil, pick it up before you turn away. One under the living room copy: do not sit on the floor after midnight. One under the hallway copy near the closet: if you leave, lock twice. If you arrive, knock once and wait. They were instructions to keep my shape inside my shape. They sounded like superstitions, because superstition is just a shape repeated on purpose. I stopped inviting anyone over. It was easier to obey when I didn't have to explain why I was drying a spoon at 1 in the morning because I had dropped it. I told Myra about the updates, and she nodded like an accountant balancing a ledger. "They getting ready," she said. "If the list starts to address you in specifics, it's moving the seals." "What seals?" I asked again because the word felt too formal. "You think a locked door is a seal because you can feel it in your hand," she said. "But a seal is a condition that keeps a boundary true. The couch against that wall is a seal. The rug with the pattern under the table, a seal. The bed where it is, a seal. It's not about furniture. It's about what the furniture is doing to the lines in the room. The rules tell you where the lines are weak so you can keep them supported. The master rule is simple: do not move support. So we're supposed to live in a museum," I said, "everything in its place forever. Until you can move it without breaking the shape," she said. "Most people cannot. Most people should not try." She glanced at my hands. "You are not most people because the list noticed you. It wants to see what you will do." I wanted to protest that I was ordinary. I went to work, I paid rent, I slept, I didn't whistle anymore. The apartment shook its head like a parent who knows what you like when you not being watched. On a Sunday afternoon near the end of my first month, I dropped my keys near the bookshelf and they slid under it. The shelf was short and stuffed, and I couldn't get my hand flat enough to reach. I thought of a wire hanger. I thought of calling Myra to hold a flashlight while I tried. Then I thought of the obvious thing and hated that I thought it. I moved the bookshelf 2 inches. It wasn't heavy. The felt pads on the bottom side against the floor. I reached in, grabbed my keys, and slid the shelf back to where it had been. The lines in the rug matched the impressions. I stepped back and felt okay. The apartment didn't creak. The list didn't shuffle. At bedtime, the living room copy had a new hairline at the bottom where a new line had pushed the plastic from beneath. The thin print said, "If you move, make it count." It was not scolding. It was a nudge under the ribs. I slept badly. In my dream, the room was rotated 90 degrees and nothing fit, but my body tried to act like it did. I woke with the feeling that a corner had shifted, and I had not noticed which one. Monday, the list inside the front door added a line under "no whistling indoors" I hadn't seen. "Never hum at the threshold." It wasn't a joke. It was aimed at me. I hummed when I was nervous, and I had hummed when I left for work every morning the week before. "They learning you," Myra said when I told her. "It's not personal like a neighbor you wronged. It's mechanical and hungry. Your patterns are door handles. They want permission without asking." "How do they get in?" I said. "They don't," she said. "If you do not help." That's the use of the rules. That should have been the end. Follow the rules, live quietly, wait for the lease to end, and move. But the list had started to write to me, and there is a kind of pride in being noticed even when the one noticing you is not kind. I started to think about the furniture. I stared at the bed, and the couch, and the bookshelf, and the dining table. I walked the lines between them like I could feel drafts in the air. I tried to imagine what would happen if I broke the master rule not to rebel, but to fix something else. The rules felt like they were tightening to force a mistake. I didn't want to give them that mistake by accident. If I was going to fail, I wanted to do it on purpose and for a reason I chose. I drew more maps. I drew the apartment as if the furniture were weights on a scale. I thought about the word seal and how it could mean a mark that a king presses into wax or an animal that holds its breath and slides under a border meant for those with gills. I wasn't a king. I was someone who could try not to drown. The next new line arrived on a Thursday evening on the copy inside the bedroom. It said, "Do not sleep in the living room unless the bed is occupied." It was a sentence that only made sense if someone was keeping track of where I was and where my absence left a shape open. The bed carried a seal. An empty bed was a weak line. A body in the bed held the line. If I slept on the couch, the bed's line went slack. I went to work the next morning and sat at my desk and typed emails while thinking about my bed as a plug in a drain. I got up and took a walk at lunch with my phone in my pocket and my eyes on the ground. I called Myra. "What happens if you move something on purpose?" I asked. "If you don't understand where it belongs, you make a hole," she said. "If you do understand, you make a wall. Don't move anything large. You are not ready." "Ready for what?" "For them to notice your new shape," she said. "And test it." That night I fell asleep with my maps on my chest and woke at 3 to the softest kind of knock. Not pipes, not the front door. The coffee table tapping the rug as if it were shivering. I sat up. The table was where it had been. The couch pressed my back. The lamp was off. The room agreed with itself. But the knock came again, a tiny note in the wood, and then the rug shifted a thread, as if something underneath had turned and found the underside of my foot with its face. "Enough," I said softly to the room, because sometimes you speak before you know why. I got up and went to the hallway laminates. The bathroom one had a new line. "If you hear knocking after midnight, check seals." That was a phrase I hadn't written in my own head yet. The list was now using my word. I stood in the center of the living room. I closed my eyes and tried to imagine threads. The couch anchored one line to the wall. The rug anchored another to the floor. The table fixed a point in the pattern on the rug. The bookshelf near the door held down something like a flap over a hole that didn't want to be covered. "If I move you," I said to the bookshelf, and felt silly and then not silly at all. "What do you let through?" I slid the shelf an inch, then back. The knocking stopped. The air felt neutral. If I moved it more, something would come up like water through a drain. I went into the bedroom and stood facing the bed. The headboard held the wall that faced the hallway. The mattress's length ran from door to window. In my mind, the bed was a lid. If I turned it, I could rotate the seal like a lens and change what it covered. I didn't know if that would make anything better. I only knew the list had started to update faster, and if it wanted me to stay put, I was already moving in my head. On Saturday, I visited a used bookstore 2 blocks away and bought a pack of index cards and a pencil. I came home and wrote each rule on a card and moved them around my map. I played a game of solitaire that had no winning hand. The master rule sat like a thundercloud on a separate card: never rearrange the furniture. Under it, in thin print I hadn't noticed before on the living room copy, there was now a parenthetical I did not like: unless you know what you are doing. It didn't excuse me. It dared me. I told Myra. She sat down. "Sometimes the house decides to try a rotation," she said. "Not because it is kind. Because something is pressing on the other side and your apartment's geometry happens to be serviceable. If it counts you as someone who might understand, it will tempt you. It will also punish you for trying. It wants what the other side wants, which is stability that serves it, not you. So I should do nothing," I said. "Not nothing," she said. "You should decide what kind of tenant you are. Do you keep the seals and live small? Or do you try to move the lines and accept that if you fail you will live nowhere at all?" I got up. "What did you do?" She looked at her plantless corner. "I moved a small thing. It took me a long time to understand where to move it back." "What did it cost you?" I asked. "A habit," she said, and didn't explain. "I decided on a night. Not because I felt brave. because the changes were accelerating and I wanted to act before they pressed me into an accident. Wednesday at midnight, a neutral hour between one date and the next. I would cover mirrors, empty cups, close closets, lock the door twice, and try to rotate the bed. I said the plan out loud to the empty room because I knew I wasn't alone in the way that counts when someone else is paying attention. If the house could hear me, let it. It would hear me anyway. It wrote to me like a polite thief who leaves notes on your fridge and takes meat from the back of the freezer so you won't notice until you're hungry. On Wednesday, I came home early. I ate something simple. I filled the bathtub with a thin layer of water and then drained it to check if it flowed. It did. No slow swirl, no standstill. I dried the tub. I covered the mirrors long before sunset like a parent who won't trust a child to do it right later. I moved anything small that could rattle into a drawer. Midnight came like a curtain falling. I stood by my bed. The laminate page on the bedroom wall looked brighter in the low light as if it had been oiled. I read the master rule again. I said I understood. I did not. I knew that I could not leave the bed where it was if I wanted to try. I lifted the foot of the bed an inch. The frame complained. The room shifted as if it had been holding its breath, and I forced it to inhale. I moved the bed slowly, carefully, like someone turning a safe dial. The headboard left the wall and I rotated the frame 90 degrees so that the bed now ran perpendicular to the hallway wall. The air tightened behind my ears and flattened in front of my face. My knees shook. I set the bed down. The apartment responded. In the living room, the couch scraped the wall by itself, a finger's width, and stopped. In the kitchen, a glass inside the cabinet knocked as if someone in there had misjudged the shelf's edge with their teeth. In the bathroom, something took one careful step from the place behind the mirror to stand where a reflection would stand if a reflection had weight. I didn't run. Running would have made my shape wrong. I stood still as long as I could, then I walked to the living room and put my hands on the back of the couch. I pulled it a fraction away from the wall to match the bed's angle. The couch resisted. Then it agreed with a small give like a neck releasing after a long day. I went to the bookshelf. I slid it an inch to the left. It hummed in the way a heavy thing hums against wood when it likes its new place. I turned the rug under the coffee table 15 degrees. The pattern on it aligned with a crack in the floor I had never noticed. The crack looked like a line drawn with a ruler by an impatient hand. Something began to move inside the house like air, turning into someone's idea of a person. I could hear the neighbors above me turn in their sleep. I could hear the pipe in the wall test my patience for knocks. The laminated sheet near the door lifted on one corner without wind and then fell flat again. The apartment was adjusting its seals with me or despite me. I didn't know which. A point arrived where waiting would become surrender. I stepped into the hallway and put my hand on the hall closet doorknob. The rule said, keep closets closed after midnight. It did not say, never open one when you are moving seals. It did not know, or it pretended not to know. I cracked the door and reached inside for the trash bag with the small things I'd hidden. I pulled out the wind chime and set it on the top shelf without letting it ring. I put my hand on the door and closed it. The click sounded like a sentence ending. The bathroom mirror cover fluttered one corner as if something behind it had sighed. I am not forgetting you, I said quietly. You're part of this. I walked back to the bedroom. The bed was strange in its new place. It made the door look more important because now it didn't have a line directly facing it. It had a line that crossed it. I stood at the foot of the bed and looked at my maps. This was the rotation they had implied and had not drawn. The headboard no longer fixed the hallway, the bed now braced the window line. The hallway wall would need a new support. I picked up the dresser and dragged it 4 inches closer to the door until its side grazed the wall that used to be anchored by the bed. My breath cursed me for trying to be better than I was. I set the dresser down. The floor did not crack. The ceiling did not answer. A sound like a sigh traveled from the bathroom to the front door and back, as if the apartment had decided to try trusting me for a second. It didn't last. A soft step sounded under the living room rug and stopped near the coffee table, like anyone would stop at a coffee table because it is an obstacle that requires a decision. The mirror cover in the bedroom lifted a corner and held it like a finger asking a question without needing to hear the answer. The faucet in the kitchen squeaked once as if it had been turned and turned back. My hand shook before my head did. I went to the bathroom and pressed the cover flat. I counted to 5. I wanted to count to 10, and I did not because 10 left too much room for bravado to step in and wear my shoes. There was one more piece, the metal coat rack in the hall. It wasn't too heavy. It had sat where it sat since I moved in because it felt harmless. A line of nothing that told you where to put things. I picked it up and moved it to the other side of the hallway so that when I entered, the first thing I would pass would not be the rack but the closet. I set the rack down. Its base met the floor with a small sound that did not echo. Everything in the apartment seemed to lean a fraction of a degree and then catch itself. I had rotated the seals. I had, without any formal authority, rewritten the room enough to warn the other side that if they wanted me, they would have to learn new steps. The house replied. A knock came, not from the pipes, not from the ceiling, not from the front door. It came from the bathroom floor drain, 3 light taps like someone with careful hands and a habit had practiced this exact rhythm 1,000 times waiting for someone like me to listen. I walked in. I stood over the drain. The laminated sheet on the wall shone. The new print below the old rules moved. It said, "You are being seen." I whispered because whispering felt like the right size of voice to use, I know. The taps stopped. The silence after them had a shape I hadn't noticed before. It sounded like a hallway that didn't belong to the building, a hall that waited behind the mirror and under the drain and between the rug threads, connecting thresholds like joints connect bones. The rotation held until 3 a.m. Then it began to test me. The couch scraped again, not by accident. The rug slid as if something had tried to step and failed to make the shape of a foot. The bookshelf clicked against the wall, one sound only, like a knock returned. The mirror cover rose 1/2 inch and stayed there until I looked and then settled as if embarrassed to be caught. I went to the living room and placed my palms on the coffee table. No, I said. The word was not magic. It was mine. Whatever was under the rug pressed up once and then flattened. The table calmed. The couch stopped. The apartment exhaled in a way I could feel in the part of me that notices when a room is about to repeat itself. At dawn, I slept for an hour. When I woke, the rules had updated across all the copies. New thin print in the same hand I had come to hate and rely on. Keep the mirrors covered until noon today. Do not accept deliveries. Do not open the window. Do not sit on the floor. I imagined a courier with my name on a box that contained only the idea of me and the invoice for what I had cost. I called in sick. I sat in a chair with my feet flat and my back straight while the apartment waited to see if I would lean against a wall or look at myself in a reflection. The rules kept me in a small square and I stayed there because I had moved the rest and now I had to live with my new shape. Myra knocked at noon and I didn't open the door. I asked through it who she was. She said, "It's Myra," and the door seemed to hear my heart. I opened and she saw the bed and the couch and the turned rug. "You did it," she said. "I did something," I said. "Did you plan the new lines or did you luck into it?" she asked. "Both," I said. "It felt like a combination more than a plan. They try to make you move it back the wrong way," she said. "Not to undo it, to twist it." Dante listened to knocks. Dante answer voices that use your name from the hallway after dark. "What happens if I make one wrong move?" I asked. "Then the seals rotate you," she said, "and you become a room you can leave." She left me with this new idea that I could be turned like furniture and kept. The house calmed in the day. The night sharpened. I learned the small changes in sound, the whisper of a cover moving, the tiny tick of wood. I learned to not make new patterns. I learned to break my habits before something else could use them as handles. 2 nights after the rotation, one of the rules changed on its own while I watched. The master rule stepped into the light and gave me a look, never rearrange the furniture. Under it, in thin print I had not invited, it added, again. It wanted me to stop. It wanted this to be the new normal it would control because it would learn my new shape, and then, when I had set my life to it, it would shift again and ask me to fail by being faithful to my own plan. I stared at the word again and I thought of the previous tenant. I thought of the word Myra had said, ever. I thought of a pair of words that look like each other but are not, seal and steal. I had stolen a position from the other side. It would try to steal me in return. I slept in the bed in its new place. I kept my back to the room and my face to the wall, not because I thought the wall was safe, but because I wanted to feel where the room leaned. It leaned where the couch was. It leaned where the rug was. It leaned in all the places I had touched. The week that followed was a dance that did not admit I was dancing. The laminate sheets added things like a parent adds extra steps to a routine once a child has learned the first set. If you come home after dusk, hum in the hallway until you ray at your door. No humming at the threshold, I remembered, so I hummed in the space before it and stopped at my door like a note turned back. Turn on the light and then off once in the bathroom before bed. I did, and the mirror cover stiffened at the edges like a drum. Do not step over the rug. I walked around it and the coffee table settled. It was workable. It was livable in the way a walk on a narrow ledge is livable if you do not look down. And then the apartment decided I should look. At 3 in the morning on a Monday, my phone buzzed with a message. I didn't pick it up because the rules had said no light after 1 unless I was in bed and I was up to use the bathroom. The buzz came again. It was Myra. Don't look in any mirrors, it said. Not tonight. I went cold in the small way you do when you reminded that other people exist and can get hurt in the story you telling yourself is only about you. I sat on the edge of the tub and waited for the urge to lift the cover to pass. It didn't the urge wasn't mine. It pressed from the other side of the mirror like someone leaning their forehead from a different room. The cover had weight like wet cloth. I spoke out loud so the apartment knew I was choosing the words. No. The urge shifted to the hallway closet. Open me, check your bag. I stood and pressed my hand on the closet door and kept it closed. The rules on the wall next to it glistened. The thin print held still as if it too were waiting for me to read the wrong line. The front door handle turned half an inch. It was not the building settling. It was not a draft. It turned like a hand that had waited for me to open from the inside. 2 locks held. I had locked twice like the rule said. The handle eased back to its resting place. Myra texted again. They found a shape that fits you. It's trying. Hold until dawn. I understood a thing I hadn't before. The apartment didn't have to be malicious to be deadly. It just had to be indifferent to what I called me. Dawn came. The urge thinned. The cover on the mirror felt light again. I slept an hour and dreamed of walking in a place that had no corners and no furniture, only doorways with no doors, and my name said with an accent it had never had. I stayed home. I made soup. I put the bowl in the sink when I finished, and then I remembered the rule about vessels and emptied it. The laminate near the sink lifted, and I watched a new line write itself in thin print so fast it felt like a finger pressing through from behind. Rearrange the living room for guests after sunset only if the bed is occupied. I did not have guests. It wanted me to act as if I would. It wanted me to divide my attention between my life and its game. That is how you get tired. That is when you make a mistake that looks like goodwill. I texted Myra, when do I stop obeying? She replied, when you can write your own rule and the house prints it. I stood by the front door. I took an index card and a marker. I wrote in block letters, if it knocks from inside the walls, do not knock back. I taped it under the laminated sheet. I waited. The card curled. The tape held. I went to the kitchen. When I returned, the card was under the laminate instead of on top. The plastic was warmer and the thin print had added at the bottom. That is a good rule. I breathed. Then I cried because I was tired and I hadn't let myself say it. The house did not care. It liked the rule because it made the lines cleaner. It wasn't on my side. It was only on the side of not being eaten by its own thresholds. I wrote another, if you must move, move once. The laminate hesitated. It did not accept it. It let the card sit on top like a note on a desk that stays until a boss decides to look. Days passed. Nights stretched. The other side tested the new shape less often, but when it did, it chose times when I would dislike myself for being weak if I failed. During a phone call with my mother while I was flossing, when a song I loved found my mouth and asked to be sung. I held. I hummed silently in my chest and felt silly, then brave. The apartment settled. The rules settled. The master rule did not change again for a while. It sat above me like a judge who had decided to not call my name that day. Then the building manager came by to check the smoke alarms. He knocked at 11 in the morning on a Saturday. He wore a tool belt and a face that said he wanted to be done by noon. He looked at the laminated sheet like it was a stain he could not scrub off without making a different mess. "You lucky," he said. "Furniture included. Not many units have that." "Part of the deal," I said. I am not allowed to move it. They always say that, he said. He climbed on a chair to press the test button on my alarm. He glanced around my living room, and the angle of his eyes made me want to stand between him and my couch and declare the geometry had papers. Some tenants do whatever they want. Then I get a call about smells. He said it like a joke, but his mouth didn't move. Smells? I asked. Old building, he said. Weird drafts. Electrical. Don't worry. He climbed down. Call if your alarm chirps. He left a card. It had the building's main line and his name. It looked like a card that belonged to a different problem. That night, the rules did not change. The night after that, they did. In thin print under the master rule, trust the lines you made. It was not encouragement. It was a setup. If it could get me to trust the new lines too much, it could move one and I would fall where it wanted. I woke to the sound of water where there was no water. Not the drip-drip of a negligent faucet. A soft spread on tile. I went to the bathroom and turned on the light and saw that the floor was dry and the drain was dry and the mirror was covered, and yet my ears had not been wrong. I put my hand over the drain. It was cold in a way that wanted the name cold to be something else. I turned off the light. I listened. I went back to bed and lay there. The sound of water continued until it occurred to me that it was not water at all. It was the sound of fabric sliding over glass, the mirror cover moving on its own in another unit. Someone else had forgotten, or someone else had updated. I thought of Myra. I texted her and got no reply. I waited until morning and knocked on her door. She opened slow. She looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. "It's fine," she said before I asked. "It's fine," she said. I didn't know what that meant, and I didn't ask, because this was one of those situations where language will only widen the hole. The following week, the list started to insist on small courtesies that weren't about manners. Knock before entering your own bathroom. Say your name at the front door before unlocking. Tap the table twice before setting down a bowl. They read like rituals, and they were. I could feel how each one would steady a line that wanted to twist. I could also feel how each one was a chance for the other side to learn how I moved. I decided to write my own rule again. I picked the living room copy and used a thick marker. I wrote, "If the list asks me to act like a guest in my own home, I will refuse." I taped it under the laminate. It did not slide under like before. It sat. The plastic did not warm. I waited. The apartment did not exhale. I made lunch. I came back. The card was gone, and in its place the thin print had added, "You are not a guest." It was true. It was also not comfort. It meant I didn't get the courtesies guests get. I didn't get the mercy of ignorance. I had to be the host. I had to keep the rules, because if I didn't, the house would host me, and I would not be myself. Then came the night it all turned on the master rule, and I had to bet everything on the rotation I had made. I woke at 2 to a sound that did not belong. Not the pipes, not the mirror, not the hum of the fridge. It was a tap-tap scrape that came from beneath the bed and beneath that, as if floors I could not enter were stacking directions under me. I sat up. The air felt like it was about to speak. The laminated sheet on the bedroom wall moved. The plastic released and fell, slapping the wall as it slid down. It landed face up on the floor. The typed rules were unchanged. The thin print had added at the bottom 3 words only, "Move it back." I stared. It could have asked, it could have warned, it could have offered. Instead, it commanded. It wanted me to put the bed where it had been. It wanted me to act in panic and undo the seals that I had balanced. It wanted a hole. "No," I said. It sounded like an idea saying its own name. The knocking under the bed became footsteps, slow and patient, pacing the perimeter of where a bed used to be, but wasn't. It circled the absence. It found edges that were not edges anymore. It pressed and found no purchase. It started to try the living room, the rug, the table. The coffee table moved a fraction. The rug tried to twist out from under it. The couch leaned. I went to the living room and put my hands on all 3 at once, as if I had more hands than I have. The lines held because I had set them, and because I had not set them alone. The house was with me in spite of itself, because the seals prefer being seals to being food. "You can only press," I said into the room. "You cannot turn, you cannot move, I can." The words felt too big until I said them, and then they fit. The mirror cover in the bathroom lifted again. I did not go. The front door handle turned. I did not go. The drain tapped. I did not go. "You are not a guest," the thin print had told me. It was not a comfort, but it was a job description. I returned to the bedroom and put both hands on the bed frame. "If you move," I said gently to the room and to myself, "carry the turn through. Do not stop halfway." My maps were in my head. The new lines were stronger than the old if I kept them as one system. If I made this about a single piece, the bed, I would lose to the aggregate. I lifted the bed again, 2 inches, and shifted it an inch further from the door. I set it down. The dresser hummed against the wall in reply. The couch settled forward a finger's width. The rug gave a small twitch and then lay absolutely still. I had advanced the rotation a notch like a safe dial. The footsteps under the bed hesitated. They were used to the old path, the old pattern. They had no map for this. Something tried the mirror again. The cover rose an inch, 2 inches. I kept my eyes on the bed. "No," I said, not to the mirror, but to my desire to look. The cover fell. The footsteps retreated a step and then tried the hall closet. The door clicked once and stayed closed. The apartment held. I held. The thin print on the fallen laminate sheet bled a little, the wetness of it like an old printer that had been used too hard. A new line wrote itself sideways along the margin as if it didn't have space and didn't care. "Finish what you start." So I did. I moved the bed another inch. I turned the rug 2 degrees. I shifted the coffee table to keep the pattern aligned. I pulled the bookshelf flush to the wall, then eased it back a hair until it hummed. I moved in a rhythm that did not belong to me, but that I learned by stepping into it. I moved like a caretaker of a place that would never admit it needed care. The footsteps lost their path. They wandered under the floor and found no exit. The pipes did not knock. The mirror did not lift. The door did not turn. The house made a sound like an apology it would never say again. Dawn came. The light in the windows was a gray that liked itself. The thin print at the bottom of the laminate dried. I picked up the page and smoothed it against the wall. The master rule stayed the same. Under it, a new line I could have sworn was in my handwriting appeared and made my stomach ache with relief and dread. "Never rearrange the furniture unless you know what you are doing." It had printed my condition. I slept. I woke. I went to work as if people don't get remade in apartments you can find on a map. I did my job. I came home and did not whistle. I cooked. I washed my bowl. I dried it. I did not open the window. I was the same person with an added verb I kept. Weeks went by and the list wrote less. It did not need to tell me to hum in the hall. It did not need to tell me to lock twice. It did not need to tell me to tap the table. I did those things because they were mine now, not because the plastic told me to. I wished that was the end. That I learned a set of rules, and the house left me alone, and I was allowed to age like anyone else who lives in a place and dies there, because that is what places are for. But the apartment had one more change to make, and it was small and mean in the way small things are when they are the last thing to be done. A notice came under my door in spring. Rent was going up, not by much, enough to make me consider moving if I were still someone who could. I picked up the paper and I felt the shape of my life at the edge of my hands. I called Myra. "I am thinking about leaving," I said. She did not answer in a way that would comfort. "You can think about it all you like," she said. "Pack if you want. Put things in boxes, tape them. Just don't do the last thing without reading first." "Reading what?" I asked. "The list," she said. "Because it has an opinion." I thought she was being dramatic. I pulled boxes from the hall closet. I put books in them. I wrapped mugs in old shirts. I folded my few clothes that wear in tea on the rack. I took a picture down and found I had hung it from a nail that had been there before me. I taped a box. The apartment was quiet in the way of a person listening at a door, not wanting you to know they were there. I went to the laminated sheet by the door to check the master rule, not because I didn't remember it, but because I wanted to force the house to watch me decide. The plastic was flat. The typed rules were clean. The thin print at the bottom had changed and I had not heard it move. It said, "Do not leave." 3 words, no please, no explanation, no threat. It was not even angry. It was administrative. I felt a weight behind my knees and I sat on the floor without thinking, then jumped up because one of the rules still said, "Do not sit on the floor," and I wasn't about to break it while the house held a marker to my name. I stared at the 3 words for a long time. There was a way to read them that meant kindness. Do not leave because you are safe here now. There was the other way. Do not leave because you are a piece in a puzzle and the puzzle will not let you walk off the board. I phoned Myra. "It says do not leave," I said. I kept my voice steady because I had decided I was not the kind of person who gives the house tears when it wants salt. She exhaled. Of course it does, she said. It's a seal. What does it seal? I asked. She said. In here. I can live like that, I said. You're already living like that, she said. But listen to me. A seal can be moved, not broken. Moved. If you try to break it, you'll break yourself. If you move it, you'll reset the shape. You'll pay a price. Nothing stays the same without someone paying. What price? I said. A habit, she said again, or something you think is yours. I did not like that answer. I also didn't have a better one to buy. I unpacked the boxes because you do not try to move a seal with your life taped shut. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at my map in my head. The sentence, "Do not leave," lived now on the door seal. The door had been held by locks and rituals. Now it had a rule that would not be fooled by passwords. I had one move left, a rotation not of furniture but of meaning. The house had learned my patterns. I would have to change the pattern that mattered most, the path of my arrival and departure. I waited until night because that is when houses listen. I went into the bathroom and took the mirror cover down. I held it in my hands and folded it. I put it in the hall closet. I left the bathroom mirror bare. It was against a rule and I knew it. I wasn't going to look. I went to the bedroom and pulled the bed 6 inches so that if I wanted to leave the room, I would now pass the mirror before the door. I moved the dresser to brace the hallway wall. I turned the rug one small notch so that when I walked from the bed to the living room, I would be forced to step around the coffee table in a curve instead of straight. I changed my own path. The house noticed. The thin print on the laminated sheet trembled the way ink trembles when a hand is unsteady. It wrote, "Mirrors covered at sunset." "No," I said. "They covered at dawn." Nothing wrote back. The mirror looked at the room and offered me the chance to belong to it. I did not take it. I moved the coat rack again to give my return path a new shape. I placed my shoes on their sides so that I would have to bend and turn to put them on. I locked the door, and then I unlocked it, and then I locked it again, and then I stood with my hand on the handle and waited. I had to leave, not forever, just once, to move the seal. I had to go out like a person leaving their home and then come back like a person who lived somewhere else. I waited until a car outside passed and the sound covered my breath. I unlocked both locks and opened the door. I stepped into the hall. I closed the door behind me so the house could be a room and I could be a person with a choice. I stood. I listened. I heard someone open another door on a floor above. I heard the elevator. I heard the building like a body sleeping on its side. I knocked once. I waited. I said my name. The door did not open because doors do not open themselves unless you are the kind of person who survives cleanly in stories, and I am not that person. I opened it. I stepped back inside. I closed it. I locked twice. The thin print did nothing. It sat like a teacher grading in a way that made you think you had failed and then handing you a paper with a quiet check mark in the corner. I had left and I had returned and I was still myself. The house had watched and had not taken the opportunity. It would wait for the next step. I took the mirror cover and hung it back. I turned off the lights. I lay in bed and thought of the price Myra had mentioned. A habit. In the morning, I put on my shoes and opened the front door and left for work without humming, without whistling, without saying my name. I locked once. I walked to the elevator. I went to the street. I made my day different. I came home at dusk and did not hum in the hall. I stood before my door with my keys in my hand and I didn't knock. I didn't say my name. I opened the door and stepped inside. The house felt wrong for 1 second, the way your mouth feels when you put your tongue where a tooth used to be. It adjusted. The laminate by the door wrinkled and then smoothed. A new thin line appeared under "Do not leave," unless you understand the path. I breathed. I had moved the seal, not broken it, moved it from a command to a condition. It didn't free me completely. It didn't hand me a key to give to anyone else. It gave me the right to negotiate with my own life. I paid the price Myra had promised without drama. It took me a week to notice. I stood in the kitchen making tea and I tried to whistle like I used to. Nothing came. My mouth shaped it and my lungs pushed and nothing happened. The air left me quiet, a habit gone like a sock. I tried to hum. It was a shape I could not make anymore, not even under my breath. It was a small price and it cut me like paper. I told Myra. She nodded. "They take something you used to make a handle," she said. "They don't need it anymore. You don't get it back." That is how I live now. The bed is where I put it. The couch is almost where it was, only smarter. The rug agrees with the floor, and the bookshelf keeps a corner I no longer try to change. The mirror covers hang and come down on a schedule that feels like a breath I can keep. The rules are shorter. The thin print is rare. It watches. It waits. I will not say the house is a friend. It is a set of conditions. I meet them. It meets mine. We balance like two people on a plank who don't want to fall. Sometimes, late at night, I walk to the door and check the laminated sheet to make sure it still says what it said last time. Not because I think it will lie, because I think I will forget. The last line sits there like a quiet policeman, do not leave. Below it, my condition waits as an outline I wrote and the house accepted, unless you understand the path. I keep my keys on the table now. I don't put them on a hook. I like the small clink they make like a heartbeat I can count. Sometimes I stand in the dark and hold them, and I think of the other person I might be if I had not read a laminated sheet on the first night and laughed at it, and then covered the mirror like I had promised myself I wouldn't, and then listened to knocks I tell people I never heard. When I try to whistle out of habit, nothing comes. The quiet reminds me of the price I paid to shift a line I could not move any other way. It reminds me that I did not trick the house into kindness. I learned to stay. And on some mornings, when I open the door to go to work and lock it twice and step into the hall without humming, I see the edge of the laminate lift without a draft and settle, a small nod. The door chain, which I never touch, hangs in a slightly different angle, as if someone put a hand there and then remembered they could not come with me. I leave anyway. I close the door. The locks click. The quiet behind them is even. The last thing I see before the elevator opens is the thin black line of the door chain tilting 1 degree to the left, and then straightening as if it changed its mind at the very last second. Liked this video? Watch the next horror here. Subscribe for more.